in the rich area of Lekki, inside a big white house with tall gates and palm trees. Fred and Sheila sat at the dining table. The house was quiet, too quiet for two people who used to talk all the time. Fred, a 45-year-old man with a serious face, was pressing his phone and didn't look up once. Across from him, Sheila sat in silence, wearing her red silk robe. She was 39, still beautiful, but she felt alone. The food in front of them was cold. Fred finally stood up and said, "I have a meeting," then walked away. He didn't even glance at her. Sheila sat still, watching the space where Fred used to sit and laugh with her. She looked around at the big living room. Shining tiles, wide stairs, a flat-screen TV on the wall. Everything looked perfect, but it didn't feel like home anymore. She picked up her wine glass and took a small sip. Her heart felt heavy. Fred used to call her sweet names and kiss her before bed. Now, he didn't even say goodnight. She didn't know if he was tired, hiding something, or just didn't care anymore. All she knew was that something between them was broken. The next morning, Sheila stood in front of the bathroom mirror, brushing her hair slowly. She wore a soft cream robe, but her face looked tired. Fred had left the house early, as usual. Without saying a word, Sheila dropped the brush and walked into the closet, picking out a simple yellow dress. As she slipped it on, she looked at herself in the mirror again. The house was big, clean, and full of everything money could buy. But she felt like a stranger in her own life. Downstairs, the maid was cleaning while music played softly in the background. Sheila walked past her without a word and went to the kitchen. She opened the fridge, pulled out some fruit, and sat at the marble counter. Her phone buzzed, but it was just a bank message. She sighed, dropped the phone, and rested her chin in her hand. It had been weeks since she and Fred had talked like a real couple. She missed laughing, cooking together, even watching TV late at night. Now, it was just silence and lonely meals. Later that day, Sheila heard the gate open. She walked to the window and saw Zara's car pull in. Her 21-year-old daughter stepped out wearing ripped jeans and a black crop top, phone in hand, laughing loudly at something on her screen. Sheila watched for a moment, remembering when Zara used to come to her for advice. Now, she barely came out of her room. The door opened and Zara walked in, still smiling, but barely greeted her mother before heading upstairs. Sheila turned back toward the window and sighed. Zara's room upstairs was a mess. Clothes on the floor, makeup on the table, and loud music playing. She lay on her bed, texting fast, giggling as her phone buzzed again. The message on the screen read, "Can't wait to see you tomorrow, S." She smiled to herself, hugged her pillow, and typed back quickly. Just then, a voice note came in. She played it and Samuel's deep voice filled the room. "You're the only one I think about." Zara blushed. She didn't care that he was older, he was exciting. And that's all that mattered. The next day, Sheila stood at the balcony sipping her tea when the security guard opened the gate. A black Toyota slowly drove in and parked under the shade. The driver stepped out, tall, young, and well-dressed. Sheila watched him closely. He wore a clean white shirt tucked into black jeans, his smile calm and respectful. The maid walked out and pointed him toward the door. Sheila walked down to meet him. He introduced himself as Samuel, the home tutor Fred hired to help Zara with her final exams. Sheila nodded politely, but deep inside, she felt something shift. Inside the house, Sheila led Samuel to the living room and offered him a drink. He thanked her and sat down, resting his bag beside him. Sheila sat opposite, crossing her legs and studying him carefully. His voice was smooth, and he spoke with confidence. He talked about his background, how he studied in Unilag and had been tutoring students around Lagos. Sheila smiled lightly, but she wasn't fully listening. Something about his presence was strong. Too strong. She couldn't understand why, but her heart was beating faster than normal. Zara came down the stairs with her phone in hand and paused when she saw him. Her eyes lit up. She quickly fixed her hair and walked toward them with a fake yawn. "You must be the tutor," she said, her voice playful. Samuel stood up and smiled warmly. "You must be Zara." They shook hands and their eyes held for a second longer than normal. Sheila noticed but didn't say anything. Zara led Samuel upstairs to the study room, laughing as she walked. Sheila stood alone in the living room, her tea forgotten on the table. Inside the study room upstairs, Zara dropped her phone on the table and leaned back in her chair. Samuel opened his laptop and placed a few textbooks beside her. At first, they focused on schoolwork, equations, charts, and test samples. But within minutes, the conversation drifted. Zara asked where he lived, what he liked, and what music he listened to. He answered with ease, his voice relaxed, and his eyes always meeting hers. Every time he smiled, she smiled too. The books were open, but their hearts were slowly opening as well, to something more than school. Downstairs, Sheila stood in the kitchen preparing a tray with juice and snacks. She didn't need to, but something made her want to walk in on them. Maybe curiosity, maybe something deeper. As she walked up the stairs, she heard Zara's voice, followed by soft laughter. She paused just before the door, listening. The voices were close, too relaxed for a tutor and student. She pushed the door slightly and entered. Zara turned quickly, surprised. "Mum, you didn't knock," she said. Sheila smiled and placed the tray on the table. "Just thought you two might be hungry," she said calmly. But her eyes were on Samuel. Sheila stood there for a few more seconds before turning and walking away. Samuel cleared his throat and sat straighter. Zara rolled her eyes and whispered, "She likes to spy." But the moment had changed. Samuel was quieter now, more careful. Downstairs, Sheila sat on the couch and looked toward the stairs. She couldn't explain it, but there was something about that boy. Not just his confidence, something else. Something that made her want to know more. And deep down, a part of her didn't like how easily Zara smiled when he was around. Later that evening, Sheila sat in the backyard garden, her feet resting on the edge of the stone bench as she sipped cold water. The sky was orange, the wind gentle, but her mind was full. She thought about the way Samuel spoke, how polite he was, how calm. He reminded her of the way Fred used to be when they first got married. Gentle, attentive, full of promise. She hated herself for thinking about it, but the thought stayed. She shook her head, trying to push it away, but the quietness around her only made it louder. Inside the house, Zara stood at her bedroom mirror fixing her hair. She hummed as she applied lip gloss and smiled at herself. Her phone lit up with a message from Samuel. "Thanks for today," it said. Her heart jumped. She replied, "Same here. Hope tomorrow's session is longer." She stared at her reply for a few seconds, then deleted it. Instead, she sent a simple smiley face. Still, she smiled like she had just won something big. It wasn't just school anymore. She wanted more time with him. And she didn't care if anyone noticed. Samuel sat on his bed in a small but neat apartment, not far from the estate. He stared at his phone for a moment, reading Zara's reply. Then he dropped the phone and stood up. He walked to the mirror, ran a hand over his short waves and smiled at himself. He looked good, and he knew it. But his smile faded slightly as he walked to the wardrobe. He pulled out an old file and opened it. Inside was a faded photo of him as a child, and another photo of Fred. He stared at it for a long time. The next day was quiet until late afternoon when Samuel arrived at the house again. This time, Sheila opened the door herself. She wore a soft pink blouse and black jeans, casual but elegant. She smiled politely and offered him water, which he accepted with a nod. As she walked back toward the kitchen, Samuel couldn't help but watch her. The way she moved, graceful and light. He quickly looked away when she turned back around. "Zara is upstairs," she said, then added, "You can wait in the study room." Samuel thanked her, but her voice stayed in his head longer than her words. In the study room, Zara rushed in minutes later, wearing a short white top and denim skirt. She dropped her phone on the table and smiled. "Hope I'm not late," she sighed playfully. Samuel laughed and shook his head. They began with English exercises, but before long, she was asking questions about him. Where he grew up, what he liked. He kept most of his answers short. She leaned closer, pretending to read something from his laptop. "You smell nice," she whispered. He smiled, unsure of what to say. The air between them shifted, warmer and heavier. Meanwhile, Sheila stood upstairs by the staircase, listening. She couldn't hear their words, but their laughter was clear. Something about it made her heart feel strange. She walked into her room, sat on the bed, and stared at the framed photo of her and Fred from years ago. Their smiles in the picture looked real. She touched the glass frame softly, then turned her head toward the door. A voice inside her whispered that something was changing, and it had already started right inside her house. Fred returned home that evening, his suit jacket over his shoulder, and his face looking more tired than usual. He greeted Sheila with a kiss on the cheek, and walked past her like everything was fine. She watched him go upstairs without asking how her day was. Dinner was quiet. Fred ate quickly, mumbling about work and a late Zoom call. Sheila nodded but didn't really hear him. Her eyes were on his face, wondering if he noticed how often she now smiled at someone else. But Fred was too deep in his own world to see anything. After clearing the plates, she stood by the sink, washing slowly, thinking. Upstairs, Zara sat in her room with her headphones on, playing music on her phone. Her textbooks lay open, untouched. Her mind was stuck on the way Samuel smiled earlier. She liked how he never rushed, how he listened. He wasn't like the flashy boys in her school who only cared about showing off. She picked up her phone and texted him. "Did you get home safe?" Almost instantly he replied, "Yeah, thanks. You look cute today, BTW." Zara grinned, her cheeks warming. She typed, "You're not bad yourself, tutor man." Then she locked her phone and hugged her pillow tightly. Samuel sat alone in his small short-let apartment not far from the estate. The lights were dim, and he was shirtless, lying on his couch with his phone on his chest. His smile faded slowly. On his wall was a printed floor plan of Fred and Sheila's house. He stared at it again. The safe was in the master bedroom's closet, behind the tall mirror. He knew where everything was, but the problem wasn't finding the money. It was picking the right moment. His biggest risk wasn't Fred. It was the women under that roof. And the clock was already ticking. Sheila stepped out early that morning, wearing a long cream dress and flat sandals. Her hair was packed in a neat bun, her gold earrings shining as she walked across the compound with a flask in hand. She had told the maid not to cook. She wanted to serve Samuel herself. She walked to the boys' quarters where Samuel stayed during weekdays. She knocked softly. Samuel opened, shirtless, holding a toothbrush. He looked surprised but smiled. She smiled back and raised the flask. "I brought you pap and a cara. Hope you haven't eaten." He stepped aside and let her in. Inside the room, Sheila sat on the only chair while Samuel ate on the bed. She asked about his family, his village, and how he learned to teach. He told her stories, his smile softening with each bite. Sheila laughed at his jokes, brushing her braid behind her ear, watching him closely. Her eyes moved across his chest, then quickly back to his lips. Samuel noticed, but he acted innocent. When she stood to leave, he held her hand and said, "Thank you, Ma." Her eyes met his and stayed longer than they should. She nodded, left quietly, but her heart beat fast. Meanwhile, Fred sat in his office downtown, staring at a file but not reading it. He had noticed a change in Sheila. She no longer argued, no longer touched him in bed, and always found a reason to stay busy. He picked up his phone and called his driver. "Pick me by 3. I need to get home early today." For the first time in months, Fred was ready to follow his gut. Something was off in his home, and this time, he wasn't going to wait for the storm to reach him. He was going to walk straight into it. Fred returned home earlier than usual. Around 4 p.m., the compound was quiet. The maid greeted him with surprise. "Welcome, sir. Madam is around. I think she went to check on the tutor," she said, drying her hands with a cloth. Fred nodded without saying a word. He walked slowly, his shoes echoing on the tiles. Something about the silence made his chest tight. He turned toward the back, passing the tall fence that led to the boys' quarters. As he got closer, he heard voices, soft ones, laughing, then silence. His hand hovered near the door. Sheila didn't know Fred had returned. She was seated on Samuel's bed, eating banana and groundnut from a shared plate. Samuel sat on the floor, looking up at her like a boy watching his teacher. She was laughing at one of his stories, her face full of light and ease. Then she touched his hair, commenting on how soft it was. He chuckled, leaning in. Just then, the door flung open. Fred stood there. For a few seconds, nobody moved. Sheila's hand froze in mid-air. Samuel stood slowly. Fred looked at them both, his eyes empty. "I see," he said quietly. Sheila tried to explain. "It's not what it looks like," she said, her voice shaking. Fred didn't shout. He turned to Samuel and said, "Pack your things and leave. My house today." Then he looked at Sheila and said nothing. That silence was louder than any insult. She followed him back into the main house, pleading. He sat on the couch, removed his shoes slowly, and asked, "How long?" She sat beside him, but he moved away. "How long, Sheila?" His voice cracked on the second question. Sheila dropped her face into her palms and whispered, "A few weeks." Fred and Sheila sat in silence. The air in the living room felt heavy. Suddenly, the front door opened. Tara, their 18-year-old daughter, walked in holding a textbook. Her face was bright until she saw the mood in the room. "What's going on?" she asked, looking from her dad to her mom. Fred didn't speak. Sheila stood up quickly, trying to act normal. "Nothing, dear. How was your session?" Tara raised an eyebrow. "It was fine. But I forgot my phone in the BQ. Samuel said he found it." She turned and walked toward the back door. Fred's eyes followed her, and so did Sheila's body. "Tara, wait!" Sheila called out, rushing after her. But it was too late. Tara walked into the BQ, and Samuel was still there, packing his bag. He looked up and froze. Tara looked at the scattered clothes, the shared plate on the table, and the messed-up bed. Her eyes narrowed. "What's going on here?" she asked. Sheila reached the door and stood behind her daughter, unable to speak. Tara turned around. Slowly. Is this why you said he was too young for me?" Tara's voice was no longer calm. "Mom, answer me," she shouted. Sheila walked forward and tried to touch her, but Tara stepped back. So you were the one sleeping with him? Tara's voice cracked. While telling me I was too small to be with him. Samuel lowered his eyes. Fred had now entered the room too. Everyone out, he said, voice low. We'll talk in the main house. But Tara didn't move. She looked at her father, her voice trembling. Dad, I was with him too. The silence that followed broke the walls of that small room. The silence in the room held like a storm before rainfall. Fred looked at his daughter, then at his wife, then at Samuel. He didn't say a word. He just turned around and walked back into the main house. Sheila broke into tears and tried to hold Tara, but the girl pulled away. Don't touch me, Tara whispered. You're worse than I ever imagined. Samuel, now pale and shaking, picked up his bag slowly. I didn't mean for this to happen, he mumbled. But his words felt empty. The moment was already ruined. Outside, Fred stood by the balcony railing, staring at the front gate. His chest rose and fell slowly, trying to hold back the pain. Sheila walked up behind him and placed a hand on his shoulder. He didn't move. Fred, she said softly. I'm sorry, I was lonely. You were always busy, always tired, and I felt like a stranger in my own marriage. He turned slowly, his face hard. So your answer was to sleep with the same boy who was tutoring our daughter? His voice was quiet, but it burned. She lowered her head and cried harder. Suddenly, the main gate burst open. Samuel dashed out, carrying his bag, his head down. The gateman shouted after him, Olga! Olga, wait! But Samuel didn't stop. Tara stood behind a curtain, watching from the living room window. Her chest ached with betrayal. Her first kiss. Her first love. And now, her mother had taken that from her. She walked into her room, slammed the door shut, and screamed into her pillow. Outside, Fred's phone rang. He answered it slowly. Yes? The voice on the other end made him stop breathing. Sir, we need to talk. It's about Samuel. He's not who you think he is. Fred stood still, phone pressed to his ear. The voice on the other end was clear and urgent. Sir, I'm calling from the school where Samuel claimed to work before. I saw the name in a staff reference file you requested. We never hired him. In fact, we've been looking for someone using that name and picture. He's been moving around Lagos using fake credentials. Fred's breath caught. What are you saying? The man continued. Sir, that man might be dangerous. Fred ended the call and walked into his study. He opened the drawer and pulled out a slim file that contained Samuel's resume and references. They looked professional. Too perfect. He picked up his laptop and started typing. His search revealed stories, past complaints, closed reports, and fake names connected to a man with Samuel's face. A chill ran down Fred's spine. This was no simple affair. He called out, Sheila, come here now. When she entered, still looking tired and broken, he held up the file. Where exactly did you find this boy? Sheila's face turned white. The agency, Fred. The one we always use. Fred slammed his palm on the desk. We've been fooled. This boy played all of us. Meanwhile, Tara sat on her bed, holding her diary. Tears dropped on the pages as she flipped through poems she had written about Samuel. Her world had collapsed. The boy who read her heart was a lie. Just then, her phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. She opened it. One sentence. You don't know me, Tara, but you're in danger too. Tara stared at the message, her heart racing fast. She checked the number again, but it was still unknown. Her hands shook as she typed. Who are you? The reply came in seconds. Someone who knew Samuel before he entered your home. He's not who you think he is. He doesn't love you. He's using you. And your mother. Tara dropped the phone. Her mouth was dry. It felt like her world was cracking open. She rushed to her door and locked it, pressing her back against it. Sheila, on the other side of the house, sat quietly in the guest room. Fred hadn't spoken to her since their last fight. She had made a terrible mistake, but part of her still thought Samuel cared. She looked at her phone and scrolled through their old chats. Then she paused. One of the photos he sent, a selfie, had a logo in the corner. It didn't look like something from a normal school. Curious, she zoomed in. The logo read GOS Security Limited. Her eyes widened. Security, not a school. Fred entered without knocking. He was holding a small photo in his hand. Sheila, do you remember this picture? He handed it to her. It was from Tara's birthday 3 years ago. In the background, standing near the gate, was a man in a security uniform. Fred whispered, "That's him. That's Samuel." Sheila gasped. "He was our gate man." Fred nodded slowly. "He's been watching us for years." Fred went straight to his study and locked the door. He pulled out an old laptop he hadn't used in years. He remembered installing a security camera system back when Tara was just 15. Sheila had insisted they remove the cameras after a few months, saying they made the house feel like a prison. But Fred had secretly left one active, the one near the back entrance. He connected the laptop to the hard drive and began scanning through the files. One video caught his attention. It was from 6 months ago, a night Sheila had claimed she was at her friend's house. The video showed Samuel, wearing a hoodie, sneaking through the back gate. He walked directly into the guest room, the same room Sheila used when she and Fred argued. Fred's chest tightened. His hand shook as he paused the video and stared at Samuel's face. It was him. He had been coming in and out of their home without anyone noticing. But there was more. Fred opened other files, and in one of them, from just 2 weeks ago, Samuel was seen coming out of Tara's room late at night. Meanwhile, Sheila couldn't sleep. She walked out to the balcony to clear her mind, but her heart felt heavy. She kept remembering Fred's words. "He's been watching us for years." Then her phone buzzed again. This time it was a voice message from Samuel. She hesitated, then pressed play. His voice was calm and slow. "You love me, Sheila. Don't let him get into your head. We had something real. Don't forget what we shared." She pressed delete without finishing it. The next morning, Fred didn't go to work. He sat at the dining table, dressed in a simple grey t-shirt and joggers, quietly sipping his coffee. He didn't touch his toast. His eyes were fixed on Sheila, who came down in a short blue robe, surprised to see him still at home. "You didn't leave early today?" she asked, forcing a smile. Fred didn't answer. Instead, he handed her a flash drive. "Watch this when you're ready," he said coldly, and stood up. Sheila waited until he left the room, then plugged the flash drive into her laptop. Her fingers trembled as she opened the video files. At first, her eyes narrowed. Then her jaw dropped. Samuel, entering the house through the back. Samuel, walking into her guest room. Then Samuel, sneaking out of Tara's room. Her hand flew to her mouth. She felt sick. Her breath came fast. She tried to deny what she saw, but the camera didn't lie. The worst part was the date. One of the nights Samuel was with her, he had also visited Tara. At that exact moment, Tara sat in her room, brushing her hair. She wore a peach tank top and jeans. Her phone buzzed. A message from Samuel. "I need to see you tonight. Same place." She smiled softly, not knowing her parents had just discovered everything. Downstairs, Fred picked up his car keys and made a phone call. "Get me someone who can dig deep," he said, his voice hard and calm. "I want to know who this Samuel really is." Fred drove out of their estate in Lekki with a storm brewing in his chest. He met with his old friend Kola, a retired police officer turned private investigator. Over plates of amala and yudu at a small buka in Ikoyi, Fred explained everything. "I don't care how clean he looks," Fred said, gripping his spoon tightly. "Find out where he came from, where he lives, who he talks to." "I want it all." Kola nodded slowly. "Give me 3 days," he said. "I'll bring you everything." Meanwhile, Sheila sat alone in the house, replaying the video clips over and over. Each time she watched them, her stomach turned. Her thoughts shifted wildly from anger at Samuel, to pain over Tara, to guilt about herself. She couldn't eat, couldn't think straight. What hurt most was the look on Fred's face. When he gave her the flash drive, quiet, calm, but deeply broken. That evening, she called Samuel several times. He didn't pick up. She sent a message. "We need to talk. I know everything." No reply. Tara was in her room, excited. She had dressed early for her study session, applying light makeup and spraying her favorite perfume. She had no idea her mother had already seen the videos, or that her father had begun an investigation. She only knew she was about to see the boy she believed loved her. As she waited, her phone rang. It was Sheila. "Don't go anywhere tonight," her mother said with a voice that sounded like ice. Tara frowned. "Why?" Sheila replied, "Because we're going to talk. All of us." Tara sat at the dining table, confused and annoyed. Fred sat at the head of the table, arms folded, eyes locked on Samuel, who stood awkwardly by the wall. Sheila sat quietly beside Fred, her face pale and tired. No one spoke at first. The air was heavy. Then Fred looked at Tara and asked, "How long have you been seeing him?" Tara blinked, shocked. "What?" she said. "Don't lie," Fred added, voice low but sharp. Tara turned to Samuel, whose head was now bowed. Samuel cleared his throat, trying to speak. "Sir, I never meant..." "Answer the question," Fred snapped. "How long?" Samuel looked down. "About 2 months," he mumbled. Sheila closed her eyes. Tara gasped. "You told me I was the only one," she cried. "What's going on?" Then Sheila spoke, her voice low and shaking. "He was seeing me too." The room went silent. Fred didn't flinch. Tara stared at her mother, heart pounding. "Mum?" she whispered. "You too." Tara stood up, her chair falling behind. "You're both disgusting," she shouted. "How could you?" She ran upstairs, slamming her door. Fred remained seated, breathing heavily, trying to control the storm inside him. "I warned you," he said to Sheila. "I told you. Something was wrong." Samuel turned to leave, but Fred stood. "Where do you think you're going?" he asked. "You're not walking away from this." His voice was calm, but cold as ice. Fred's voice echoed in the room as he pointed at Samuel. "Sit down," he said. Samuel obeyed, sitting slowly on the nearest chair. Sheila tried to speak, but Fred raised his hand to stop her. "There's something you're not telling us," he said to Samuel. "You didn't just sleep with my daughter and my wife out of love. You planned this." Samuel looked up, surprised. "Planned what?" he asked. Fred took out his phone and placed it on the table. "Who is Gloria?" Samuel's mouth opened slightly, but no words came. He stared at the phone. Fred tapped the screen and played a short video. A girl's voice filled the room. "Samuel, don't forget what we came here for." Get close to them. Take the photos. Get the account number. Sheila's eyes widened. What is that? She asked. Fred looked at her. A girl came to my office 2 days ago. Said she was Samuel's ex. Said he's a scammer. She gave me this video. Samuel's face turned pale. I didn't do it for money, Samuel said, his voice shaking. Gloria is lying. I left her, and she wants to destroy me. Fred shook his head. You fooled my daughter, broke my home, and now you're lying again. Sheila stood up. Is this true, Samuel? He looked into her eyes. I swear, I love you. But Sheila stepped back. Her heart was racing. Love? She whispered. This was never love. Just then, Tara came back down the stairs, holding a small black bag. He gave me this, she said. Inside was a flash drive. Fred picked up the flash drive and turned it in his hand. Where did you find this? He asked. Tara looked at him, then at Samuel. He told me to keep it safe and never open it. Fred walked to the laptop on the dining table and plugged it in. The screen came to life, showing folders named Photos, Bank Info, Recordings. Sheila leaned in. What is this? She asked. Fred opened the Photos folder. It was filled with images of their home, Tara's room, their ATM cards, even private documents. Fred clicked on a video. Samuel's voice played. They trust me now. Sheila is soft. I'll get access soon. Tara gasped. You were recording things, she asked. Samuel stood up. It's not what you think. I started this with Gloria. But I stopped. I swear. Sheila looked betrayed. So I was just part of a plan. Samuel took a step toward her. No, you changed everything. I fell for you truly. Fred closed the laptop slowly. You think this is love? He said, coldly. Suddenly the doorbell rang. Everyone froze. Fred walked slowly to the door and opened it. A young woman in jeans and a black wig stepped inside. Gloria? Samuel muttered. The woman smiled. Hope I didn't miss the drama. Sheila stared at her. Who are you? Gloria walked closer. I'm the one he left behind. And now I've come to take back everything. Or destroy it. Fred stepped in front of her. You recorded my family. Gloria raised her phone. Not just your family. Your whole life. Fred's eyes narrowed. What do you mean by my whole life? Gloria smiled and walked slowly around the living room, her heels clicking on the tiled floor. You really don't know what Samuel and I started, do you? We had access to your bank accounts, your emails, your wife's phone, even your daughter's school files. Sheila stepped back in shock. Why would you do this? Gloria shrugged. Because rich people like you never expect their help to bite back. Samuel turned to Gloria. You were supposed to delete all that. We agreed. Gloria chuckled. You broke the agreement when you fell in love with the madam. She looked at Sheila. You should see the video of him practicing his suite. Words in front of the mirror. Fred's face turned red with anger. Where's the footage? Gloria held up her phone. Let's just say, it's enough to destroy this entire house. Tara stood frozen, her voice low. Why are you doing this to us? Gloria walked to the center of the room. I want 2 things. First, I want Samuel arrested. Second, I want 50 million transferred to this account. She dropped a small card on the table. Fred stared at it. You're blackmailing us? Gloria smiled. Call it compensation. For time, love, and betrayal. Sheila finally stepped forward. What if we don't pay? Gloria's smile vanished. Then I release every file online. And trust me, your name won't survive it. The room fell completely silent. Fred stared at the card on the table without touching it. His voice was low and cold. You think you can threaten me and walk away? Gloria didn't flinch. I don't think. I know. Sheila looked at her husband. Fred, we can't let her win. But Fred's eyes were locked on Samuel. You brought this devil into our house, he said quietly. Samuel tried to defend himself. I never planned for this to happen. I made mistakes, yes, but Fred raised a hand. Save it. Tara stepped forward, tears in her eyes. Daddy, please just let her go. We don't need to fight anymore. Gloria raised an eyebrow. Wow, you still care about him. Sheila turned to her daughter. You knew? Tara nodded slowly. Since the beginning. Everyone turned toward her. Shocked. Sheila whispered, You watched me and him, and said nothing? Tara looked down. I was afraid. I didn't know how to stop any of it. Fred rubbed his forehead. This family is falling apart. Suddenly, Fred walked over and picked up Gloria's card. Fine. You want to play this game? He smiled, but it was cold. Let's play, but you better be ready to lose everything. Gloria's smile faded for the first time. You think you can scare me? Fred looked at her with calm eyes. No, I'll just make sure you're the one who ends up in jail. Sheila's eyes widened. Fred, what are you doing? But Fred was already dialing a number on his phone. Fred stood at the edge of the living room, his voice firm. Yes, Inspector. I'll send the file tonight. He ended the call and looked up. Gloria, I know everything. About the threats, about your accounts, and about your real name. The room went silent. Gloria's lips trembled for the first time. You're bluffing. Fred walked to his laptop and opened a folder. Am I? He turned the screen toward her. Transaction records, fake IDs, and messages scrolled down the screen. Sheila looked from the screen to Gloria, stunned. You're not who you said you were. Gloria's shoulders sank. I didn't mean to go this far. Fred chuckled bitterly. You planned it all. Seduce the daughter, twist the mother, use the tutor. But you made a mistake. You touched my family. Gloria stepped back slowly, her voice shaking. I didn't force your wife. She came to me. I just opened the door. Sheila looked away, ashamed. Tara turned to Samuel. And you? Were you in on it too? Samuel shook his head quickly. No, I swear. I got caught in the middle. I didn't know she was using me. Fred snapped. Of course you didn't. You were too busy chasing skirts to see what was right in front of you. Then he turned to Gloria. I have a meeting tomorrow with the police. I suggest you leave Lagos tonight. And if I see you near my family again, I'll make sure you disappear properly. This time with no fake name. The next morning, Fred, dressed in a navy blue shirt and black trousers, his face calm but his eyes sharp. He carried a black file tucked under his arm as he drove himself to the police station. Inside that file was every document, every voice note, and every message. That could destroy Gloria. But what he didn't know was that someone else had been watching his every move. Back at the house, Gloria stood by the window, holding her phone tightly. Her lips pressed together as she listened to a voice message on her burner line. He's at the station now. You know what to do. She ended the call and turned to Tara, who stood beside her in silence. If your father sends that file, I'm finished. Tara blinked. Maybe you should confess, Gloria snapped. Not an option. He's not as clean as you think. Ask him what happened in Port Harcourt 15 years ago. Meanwhile, inside the station, Fred sat with a senior officer, placing the file on the desk. Everything is here. She's not who she says she is. The officer opened the file, flipping through. You did your homework. But Mr. Fred, do you know what she has on you? Fred froze. What do you mean? The officer leaned forward. She came here 2 days ago. Gave us a different file. And your name was all over it. Fred left the station in silence, driving through the busy streets of Lagos with his mind spinning. Gloria had gone behind his back. But what did she know about Port Harcourt? That chapter of his life was supposed to be sealed forever. He parked by the roadside, pulled out his phone, and made a call to an old friend, someone who owed him a favor. Back at home, Gloria sat at the edge of the bed, reading a copy of the file she had submitted to the police. She had hired a private investigator the day she suspected Fred was pulling away. What she found shocked even her. Photos of Fred with a woman in Port Harcourt, police reports, and a missing person case. That woman had vanished, and Fred was the last person seen with her. Later that night, Fred came home early. Gloria was waiting. So, what did the police say? She asked, crossing her arms. Fred stood by the door, breathing slowly. You've been busy, he replied. She didn't blink. And you've been dirty for years. You think I didn't know about Port Harcourt? Fred raised his voice. That case was dropped. It was a setup. Gloria's face didn't change. So is this house. And you're about to be thrown out of it. Fred couldn't sleep. As soon as Gloria stormed upstairs, he opened a safe hidden behind a painting in his study. Inside was a small envelope labeled Anita. He took it out with shaky hands and sat down. The photos inside were old, one of him with a dark-skinned woman with dimples, laughing by the beach. Another showed the same woman outside a police station in Port Harcourt. The final photo was of her with bruises. That was the night everything changed. Anita had been his weakness. She was a nurse he met during one of his business trips. They had a secret affair for months until she got pregnant. When Fred tried to break it off, she threatened to expose everything to his wife and the media. He tried to pay her off, but things got out of hand. She disappeared the next day, and Fred had no idea if she was dead or alive. Now someone had reopened the case, and he feared it wasn't the police. It was someone in his own home. Back in Sheila's room, Samuel was massaging her feet while she sipped wine. She felt younger, powerful, like a woman finally being noticed. But when he leaned in to kiss her, she pulled away. Don't fall in love, she whispered. This isn't real. Samuel smiled. Then why are your eyes shaking? She turned her head. She couldn't answer that. Something about... Samuel reminded her of someone. Someone from her past she couldn't place yet. Asterisk. Fred stepped outside into the cool night air. He lit a cigarette, something he hadn't done in years, and stared at the sky. His mind kept circling back to one question. Why now? Why was his past returning like this? He turned the envelope over and noticed something stuck to the back. It was a tiny matchbox from a hotel in Port Harcourt. He hadn't seen that name in years, Hotel Sunrise. And suddenly it hit him. Samuel's last name. Fred rushed to his laptop and searched for the hotel. The site was still active. In the staff section, there it was. Samuel Ocone. A picture popped up. Younger, slimmer, but it was him. Fred's heart dropped. He clicked on the staff bio. Samuel's mother's name. Anita Ocone. And that was all he needed to see. He dropped the laptop and sat back, stunned. The boy his affair had created was now living under his roof. Sheila couldn't sleep. Her body still felt warm from Samuel's touch, but her mind kept running. She got up quietly and walked into the hallway. From there, she saw her daughter's bedroom door slightly open. She stepped closer. Inside, Valerie was asleep on the bed. but Samuel's bag was lying next to her pillow. Sheila's heart stopped. She slowly picked up the bag, unzipped it, and inside she saw photos of Fred, of Valerie, and even one of herself from years ago. She rushed back to her bedroom, locked the door, and sat down. She spread out the photos on the floor. There was one more item, a notebook. In it were short letters written by Samuel, each one addressed to Dad. The latest one read, "I forgive you, but I'll never forget what you did to my mother." Her eyes widened. Samuel wasn't just a boy who wanted love. He came here for something else. Revenge. Morning came, but it didn't feel like morning. The house was quiet, but not peaceful. Fred sat at the dining table dressed for work, staring at his phone. Sheila sat opposite him, her face pale, lips dry. Their daughter Valerie walked in, yawning and stretching, followed by Samuel, fresh and smiling. Sheila stared at him like she was seeing a ghost. Fred barely looked up. The tension in the air was too heavy to speak. Samuel noticed Sheila's gaze and gave her a warm nod. Fred's hand tightened around his glass. Valerie, sensing something off, asked if anyone was okay. No one answered. Just then, Fred stood up slowly, grabbed his car keys, and said he was going to work early. He didn't even look at Samuel. Sheila got up too and said she would go lie down. It was clear. Both were running from the truth in front of them. Samuel remained at the table, now alone with Valerie. He picked up his spoon and smiled at her. "You're the only one who's not fake in this house," he said softly. Valerie laughed without understanding what he meant. Samuel's eyes darkened for a second, then returned to normal. In his mind, today was the day he would bring the truth into the light, no matter the cost. Fred didn't go to work. He drove around Lekki for hours, hands tight on the wheel, thoughts all over the place. Everything was a mess. He thought of Sheila's coldness, the strange way Valerie defended Samuel, and how Samuel looked too comfortable in their home. Something wasn't right. He called a private investigator he had met before. "Follow the boy. I want to know everything." Back at the house, Sheila locked herself in the bathroom. Her hands shook as she splashed water on her face. She looked in the mirror and hated what she saw. Not just her face, but the shame behind her eyes. She had let Samuel get too close. She thought he made her feel alive again, but now she felt empty. The guilt was choking her, and still, she didn't know how to stop. Samuel knocked gently on her door. "Ma," he said softly, "I just want to talk." Sheila didn't answer. He waited a while, then walked away. Downstairs, Valerie was scrolling through her phone when she noticed Samuel coming down. She smiled and asked if they could go out later. He smiled back. "Sure, anything for you." Behind that smile, something darker brewed. Fred returned home that evening quietly. He didn't tell anyone he was back. From outside, he watched through the living room window. Samuel and Valerie were laughing together on the sofa. Just then, Samuel leaned closer to her. Fred's heart dropped. He turned away quickly, eyes burning with rage. That was all the proof he needed. Fred didn't sleep that night. He sat alone in the guest room, thinking. At dawn, he called the investigator again. "I want you here this morning," he said. "We'll finish this." At exactly 10 a.m., the man arrived with a brown envelope. Fred took it without a word and opened it slowly. Inside were clear photos. One of Sheila and Samuel in the kitchen, their bodies too close. Another of Samuel and Valerie walking into a hotel. Fred's hands trembled. Downstairs, Sheila was setting the table for breakfast. Valerie sat beside Samuel, giggling at something on his phone. Fred walked in silently. He placed the envelope on the table in front of Sheila. She looked up, confused. "What's this?" she asked. Fred didn't speak. She opened the envelope and froze. Valerie leaned over and her smile disappeared. The room went silent. Samuel tried to speak, but Fred raised his hand. Fred looked at his wife, then at his daughter. "You see this boy?" he said calmly. "He played both of you." Sheila's lips quivered. "It's not what you think." Fred cut her off. "It's worse. I trusted you. I protected you. But this is betrayal." Valerie stood up, her hands shaking. "Daddy, I didn't." "No, I swear." She ran to her room crying. Samuel stood frozen, unable to speak. Fred walked up to Samuel. "Get out of my house, now." Samuel opened his mouth, but one look from Fred sent him walking. Sheila followed Fred to the bedroom, begging him to. "Listen." He slammed the door. Alone, she sank to the floor, sobbing. The damage was deep. The home was broken. Nothing would ever be the same.